So good morning or afternoon or evening, depending where you are in the world, everyone. And thanks for joining our event today, Decarbonizing the Future of Flight. We're excited to have you and to be joined by an awesome panel today. This event is hosted by the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance, or SABA. And SABA is an initiative spearheaded by EDF and RMI with support from our partners at NG Impact. And the aim is to accelerate the path to net zero aviation. We're joined in this effort by 9 founding companies: Boeing, Boston Consulting Group, Deloitte, JP Morgan Chase, Microsoft, Netflix, Bank of America, Salesforce, and as of today, McKinsey & Company. Welcome, very much welcome. These companies are showing their climate leadership in many ways, including through our efforts in SABA. We're also collaborating with other key stakeholders and initiatives, including the Roundtable for Sustainable Biomaterials and the Clean Skies for Tomorrow initiative of the World Economic Forum. And we're delighted to have representatives from those on our panel today. I'm going to go through a couple of housekeeping issues, in fact, just one main housekeeping issue, and then hand over to John Kreutz at RMI, who will kick us off in earnest. So the only thing I want to mention is that the chat function today is disabled, but we want to hear from you. So please use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask your questions. And John and I can either ask those to our panel directly, our panel on the SABA team, or we'll provide answers in writing. And the questions will become visible once we've answered them in writing. So welcome again, everybody. I'm delighted to have you all here today. And now over to John to kick us off in earnest. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Kelly. Welcome, everybody. I'll be co-hosting with Kelly here today. We're delighted that you're joining us. Just one other housekeeping note is we are recording, and this video will be available here on our website at edf.org going forward, should you need to reference any of the material. I'm John Kreitz. I'm Managing Director and Chief Program Officer at RMI. We're a 40-year-old think tank committed to securing a clean, prosperous, and zero-carbon future for all using market-led, business-driven approaches. And that's a bit of the thesis for today's discussion. We're beginning today's event with a presentation. If we could advance to the next slide, yes. We're beginning today's event with a presentation from key SABA partners on SABA's mission and our plan to achieve it. After that presentation, Kelly and I are going to moderate a panel of corporate leaders, including representatives from Deloitte, the World Economic Forum, the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials, and McKinsey, to talk about how we're all working together to achieve net zero aviation. We'll close with questions and next steps. So with that, let me turn it over to Kim Carnahan, who will begin with a presentation on SABA's mission and our plan to achieve it. Kim was most recently the chief negotiator on climate change for the United States and managed the State Department climate team for nearly a decade, including through the negotiation of the International Civil Aviation Organization's carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation. Kim is now Senior Director for Net Zero Fuels at NG Impact, and we're thrilled that she and her team are the Secretariat for SABA, supporting EDF, RMI, and our founding companies to achieve our goals. With that, over to you, Kim. If we advance to the next slide, you'll see the mission statement for SABA, where SABA is committed to advancing the path to net zero aviation transport by driving investment in high integrity, sustainable aviation fuel, catalyzing new SAF production and technological innovation, and supporting member engagement in SAF policymaking. As Kelly indicated, we're supported by a set of 9 founding partners, and we're eagerly looking to expand the community here globally as we think about how exactly to advance sustainable aviation fuel as quickly as possible in this decisive decade. Kim, I know you're on now by phone. Do you want to continue on?
That'd be great. I'm sorry, my computer has just lost all audio. I have no explanation for that. So apologies, but if you can hear me now, I will continue. Excellent. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. And so for those of you who missed our launch event, I guess I'll just start by saying that we had our soft launch in April. And at that event, we explained that SABA is a joint initiative of EDF and RMI, and that we're supported by these companies that John and Kelly just mentioned. And then now, before we jump into how SABA is driving investment in SAF, it's useful to stop for a second and explain what SAF is for those of you who are new to this space. SAF, or Sustainable Aviation Fuel, is derived from renewable sources or waste feedstocks and converted to jet fuel via different technologies known as conversion pathways. You see a number of those feedstocks and pathways listed on this slide. And you might hear or read in various media the term HEFA, or hydrotreated or hydrogenated esters and fatty acids quite often. That's the most common pathway that's used today. An important point to make, and another point being made in the media pretty regularly right now, is that not all SAF delivers the same sustainability benefits, and some of it may actually do more harm than good. As you'll see later, SABA is very aware of this fact and is working carefully to ensure that that our members can support SAF that is in fact truly sustainable. Next slide. Oh, sorry, one more thing I was going to say about SAF is that the SAF that is approved for use today is a drop-in fuel, meaning that it can be added into aircraft without adjustments to the plane at a ratio of up to 50% currently. It must be blended with traditional fossil fuel before it's added, and that's what makes it a drop-in fuel. No changes are necessary to be made to the plane. So why is SABA focusing on SAF? SABA is focusing on SAF because it is the best near-term and the most widely applicable option for addressing aviation emissions. It is expensive, however, and as we all know, airlines, the entities actually buying physical aviation fuel, compete on slim margins and were hit particularly hard by COVID. So it's been clear for a while and became even clearer last year that getting customers involved in paying the green premium for SAF would be a critical piece of the plan to decarbonize aviation. A few airlines have actually started on this path already with corporate customers as partners and have been working together to purchase SAF and reduce the emissions of both the airlines and the corporate customers in those initiatives. But what they noticed is that such a process is open to a few large corporations that are able to kind of invest in learning that system. But it would be great if there was a more standardized approach and one that could be developed so that at least for now, all corporations and other organizations like NGOs or universities were able to use it. And eventually even individuals would be able to use this type of a system whereby we decouple the environmental attributes from SAF, from the physical SAF, and enable individuals and organizations to support SAF by purchasing those attributes. Next slide. So SABA has three key objectives. You see them on the left hand of the screen here: expanding the SAF investment opportunity, providing education and policy support to our members and the general public, and accelerating technology innovation. During our first kind of soft launch, this time period that we're in now, we're very much focused on that first piece, making sure that we can give more customers the opportunity to invest in SAF and to reduce their aviation emissions. And air transport customers are particularly in need of this kind of an opportunity because they don't purchase jet fuel directly. So they need a system that decouples the physical fuel from its environmental attributes, including its emission reductions. That will allow them to pay for SAF's green premium and work towards reducing it over time because it's still quite high. It will also allow them to track and claim the resulting emission reductions, and eventually also to ensure that the SAF they support is truly sustainable. So those are the pieces that we're working right now to develop. Airlines do purchase jet fuel, of course, but they can also benefit from this kind of a system that enables the transparent tracking of SAF emission reductions. And also plenty of airlines can't access SAF right now or really struggle to do so because it's actually produced in so few places. So if they don't operate regularly from an airport close to a SAF producer, then they aren't able to secure SAF. So this book and claim system eventually could also be used by airlines who are looking to invest in SAF even when they can't directly upload it to their airplanes. So SABA is working to build a system that enables this process, enables this decoupling of the environmental attributes from the physical fuel in three different streams of work, which you'll see here on the right side of the slide at the bottom. In today's presentation, we're going to focus only on the top two, kind of dive into that a little bit more and teach you about what we're doing there. And in a future presentation, we'll be happy to talk about the final one. So right now, actually, I'll go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Laura Hutchinson, who's going to talk about the SAF certificate book and claim system. Laura, over to you.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, all. My name is Laura Hutchinson, and I'm a senior associate at RMI. I focus on how we can leverage demand signals to decarbonize hard-to-abate industries like aviation. Today, I'll be talking about the mechanics of how aviation customers can help decarbonize the aviation sector by investing in SAF. The primary barrier to SAF today is its cost. SAF is much more expensive than conventional aviation fuel, so it only makes up 0.01% of jet fuel consumed today. As you can see here, SAF can cost more than twice as much as fossil jet fuel. Government incentives in some jurisdictions, as you can see in the rightmost blue bar, can help decrease this cost for airlines and customers, but today there's always a residual price premium, as you can see in the top bar in green. This price premium, often called a green premium, must be addressed if we're going to scale the use of SAF and start meaningfully decarbonizing aviation. As Kim mentioned, air transport customers have already demonstrated willingness to pay much of the green premium for SAF. Several major air transport customers, including Deloitte and Microsoft, have pioneered airline corporate partnerships to purchase SAF in the last year, and many more are keen to follow suit. SABA's current focus is to create a system that enables not just the Microsofts of the world, but all businesses and organizations, and eventually even individuals, to take tangible action to reduce their aviation-related emissions through supporting SAF. Can we go to the next slide? So how could this work? Today, SAF and its attributes are tracked and used along the physical supply chain in what's called a mass balance system, or the sequence you see in yellow at the bottom here. In a mass balance system, the environmental attributes of SAF are bundled or carried with the physical jet fuel. SABA, with our partners, is working now to create a book and claim system for SAF, in which the environmental attributes can decouple from the physical fuel, as you can see in the sequence in blue here. In this system, the fuel producer, fuel supplier, or airline would be able to request issuance of a SAF certificate into their account in a registry. The SAF certificate, which RMI helped develop within the Clean Skies for Tomorrow Coalition, represents the environmental attributes of SAF, including emission reductions over the fuel's life cycle. When a certificate is issued, the fuel and its associated environmental attributes effectively decouple. Then the certificate can be transferred to an air transport customer willing to pay the green premium. An air transport customer can then retire these certificates to credibly address their Scope 3 emissions footprint. Enabling customers to use SAF certificates to reach their climate goals is critical. If we want customers to be involved in paying SAF's green premium, then we really have to give them an incentive to do so. So where does SABA's work on this stand? Can we move to the next slide? We're aiming to develop a common and universally applicable SAF certificate system to facilitate this, with RSB, the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials, and Clean Skies for Tomorrow. In doing so, we're building from the critical groundwork laid by RSB, ISCC, and ICAO CORSIA in defining what sustainable means and how to evaluate it in a mass balance system. RSB, in addition to their role as a SAF certifier under ICAO CORSIA, are developing a book and claim manual which articulates how what RSB calls credits and what we call certificates here can be issued and transferred with the attributes of certified biomaterials supply chains. This scope includes, but is not limited to, sustainable aviation fuel. In collaboratively designing a comprehensive SAF certificate system, we're bringing together RSB's book and claim manual, Clean Skies for Tomorrow's SAF certificate concept, and the SABA team's registry design experience from the EU ETS and MIQ. In the next phase of this work, we'll complete the system by adding the two bottom pieces in green here. Together, we'll formalize SAF certificate specific rules, as well as design and build the digital infrastructure that will house these certificates, the SAF certificate registry. In the upcoming panel discussion, we'll hear from both Elena Schmidt from RSB and Lauren Upink-Calderwood from Clean Skies for Tomorrow, who we're really excited to be co-creating this system with. And with that, I'll pass the torch to Pedro Pires Cabezas from EDF to cover SABA's Sustainability Framework. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Hi, my name is Pedro Pires Cabezas. I'm actually the EDF's Director for Sustainable International Transport and lead senior economist, leading the work on aviation at EDF. As Kim mentioned before, SABA has been focusing, allocating lots of resources to understand what is the SAF Sustainability Framework since the onset of this process. And I'm just going to use a little bit of your time, just 3 slides to guide you through what we are doing and how we get in there. Okay, so first of all, what is the sustainability framework for SABA and what is the goal of this? So the first thing that we are looking to do is to safeguard the environmental integrity of the SABA eligible SAF and the SAF market that we are looking to scale. Second, we want to give SABA members the confidence that the SAF they purchase has a positive environmental impact and that the claims that they make are accurate. Finally, we also want to ensure that the SABA eligible SAF can be produced from globally available feedstocks that don't cause negative environmental impacts. And we put a lot of emphasis on this because this is a really complex issue. Can go to the next one. Thank you. All this SAF sustainability framework we've been working on is based on the groundbreaking work that the international civil aviation has been doing since 2014. I had the privilege to be involved in that process since the onset. And this ICAO process actually applies the latest science and modeling to assess the emissions reductions from sustainable aviation fuels. And the work that ICAO did is encompassing the work of CORSIA, the offsetting mechanism for international aviation. So our goal as SABA is to have a future-proof, robust, practical standard that gives comfort to our members that they are investing in high-quality SAF. Some key features of the sustainability framework that we've been working on are, of course, the life cycle assessment approach to calculate the SAF emissions over the entire life cycle of the fuel, including indirect emissions. The sustainability criteria that encompasses all 3 pillars of sustainability, environmental, social, and economic, to safeguard, among others, against negative effects on ecosystems and communities. And of course, emission reduction impact with the goal to accelerate aviation decarbonization. And not only to accelerate aviation decarbonization, but also to reduce the abatement cost of sustainable aviation fuels. The greater the emissions reduction, the lower the abatement cost for equal production cost. And last but not least, we're actually working on the accounting approach to ensure that the environmental integrity of the emissions reductions claims is as robust as possible. We go to the next one. So where we are, we have been working for a number of months. We already put together a first draft of the SABA Sustainability Framework. We share that with some stakeholders, some select key stakeholders for review. Right now, we're engaging with an independent, a group of independent SAF experts who will review the draft framework. And we're also hiring a consultant. We already hired a consultant to complete a SAF market landscape assessment. Once we have these inputs, we combine that with the feedback we got from the stakeholders and come out with a second round of the sustainability framework. We're hoping to be able to release this by the end of, by November 2021. So stay tuned. And now back to Kelly and Jon and to the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro and Laura and Kim. We're getting some great questions in the Q&A and we're doing our best to answer them live as we go. John and I are going to take that opportunity to introduce our amazing panel right now, and then kick over some questions to them. So I'll start, and then I think we're going to sort of introduce the panel Eurovision style, going back and forth between myself and John. So today, on the first day of New York Climate Week, SABA welcomes McKinsey & Company as our newest founding member. We're so excited for them to join us on our mission to decarbonize the future of flight, and we're pleased they're able to join our panel discussion today. So today we have Joop Vedering, who leads McKinsey's global environmental sustainability team, where he focuses on addressing McKinsey's firm-wide environmental footprint while sharing insights and best practice from their sustainability journey with clients, peers, and leading environmental organizations. Welcome, Joop, and we're so delighted to have McKinsey with us on the SABA journey. Over to you, John.
Yes, we're also excited to welcome Lauren Uppink-Calderwood, who is head of aviation travel and tourism at the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum, of course, has been a longtime leader in the space with their Clean Skies for Tomorrow initiative. Lauren drives thought leadership, industry strategy, and action on sustainability and climate change, travel security, and pandemic recovery, as well as impact of technology on the sector. She's a co-author of several World Economic Forum publications and represents the World Economic Forum on ICAO, IATA, and WTTC technical and advisory task forces. Back to you, Kelly.
Thanks. As Chief of Staff for U.S. Sustainability and Climate Change at Deloitte, Lisa Newman-Wise leads Deloitte's United States internal sustainability efforts, including the firm's commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2030. Welcome, Lisa.
And finally, we'd like to welcome Elena Schmidt, who is the Executive Director for the Roundtable for Sustainable Biomaterials. We'll call them RSB here for simplicity. The RSB is a multi-stakeholder organization committed to ensuring best practice in sustainable biomaterials. Elena joined RSB in 2015 and has previously served as RSB Standards Director. Prior to joining RSB, she was head of the TÜV Süd certification body for climate and energy in Germany. Terrific. Well, we're delighted to have Ford here for a discussion about sustainable aviation fuel and the future of sustainable flight. We'll start with you, Joop. First of all, let me again welcome you as a founding member of SABA here. As a former partner of McKinsey, I have to say I'm thrilled to see the progress you all are making on sustainability issues. In particular, I know that McKinsey set a target to be net zero by 2030 and a science-based target under SBTI. No small feat for any company, but particularly challenging for one whose emissions lie largely outside your direct control, as aviation emissions do. How does joining SABA's mission of developing a SAF certification system fit into your decarbonization plans? Joop, over to you.
Thank you, John. Very happy to be joining. And yes, you're right. As McKinsey, we have committed to reach net zero climate impact by 2030. And the majority of our emissions come from air travel. On the one hand side, we are working to build on lessons learned during the pandemic to embrace alternative, more sustainable working models. And on the other hand side, we are working with the industry to make travel itself become more sustainable. And we do know, as was previously shared as well, that SAF is critical for decarbonizing aviation in the near term. Now, over the past couple of years, we've been closely involved with the World Economic Forum's Clean Skies for Tomorrow coalition, working on topics such as SAF feedstock availability and sustainability, as well as the underlying economics. And we found that we need both policy-driven actions and a strong demand signal to reduce the overall costs and to make sure that over time, efficiencies of scale and technological advancements will cause the prices of SAF to drop significantly. So for us, joining SABA is really a logical next step, given the focus on realizing that very much needed demand signal. And to realize that, we do think that it's very important to implement a standardized system for customers to support SAF, and for those customers to be able to reflect such voluntary action in their carbon footprints, which today is not yet possible. And that's why SABA's work on the book and claim system that Laura just introduced is so important. Why we think it's super important to support this work, building on the framework that was laid out by the Clean Skies for Tomorrow Coalition. Also think it's very important that we'll establish a independent registry that transparently tracks emission reductions and prevents any double counting as we make progress on scaling up SAF. And then I hope that once all of this is up and running and proves to be functioning well, it will hopefully become possible for customers, including ourselves, to reflect such support of SAF in the form of purchasing and retiring SAF certificates in our carbon footprints. And we think that can be a very strong incentive to help drive investment in sustainable aviation fuel.
Thank you, Joop. That was so helpful. I'm going to turn to Elena Schmidt now, or Elena Schmidt. I'm trying to pronounce it correctly, and I'm probably not. As we heard from Laura and just echoed by Joop, the book and claim and registry system and SESs and RSB in particular have a key role in opening an avenue for customers to drive aviation decarbonization and reduce their own aviation footprint. So at SABA, this is one of the reasons we think it's so important to collaborate closely with you as we begin to build a SAF registry. For those who aren't familiar with SESs in general or RSB in particular, can you begin by explaining RSB's role in the world of SAF? In other words, how do your standards help ensure the integrity of SAF today? And then how are you expanding that role through your work and our collaboration on the book and claim and registry system?
Yes, Kelly, I'm happy to do that. And thank you again for the invite to this amazing panel. So RSB is a membership-based organization, and we are bringing together industry leaders, academia, NGO experts, producers of different scales who all have the ambition to shape a sustainable transition to a bio-based and circular economy. Now, our members cover sector leaders from aviation, shipping, chemical, consumer goods, science, also environmental and social NGOs. And this is what makes us so unique. So we all see the challenges that our societies and economies are now facing. And RSB offers the platform where the relevant voices come together to one round table to discuss the solutions to overcome the challenges and to create a zero carbon sustainable sector transition. So RSB is offering this platform for different voices can access a dialogue, which I think does not exist anywhere else in the same form. So looking at the potential technology solutions that can drive such a transition, RSB together with our members and other stakeholders convenes this dialogue on which are the most sustainable technologies, which are the most sustainable feedstocks, and therefore what would be most suited to support those worldwide commitments that we are now all seeing for zero carbon sector transition. So when we discuss with our members, this discussion is cross-sectoral. It covers all parts of the supply chain. It is science-backed and includes the voices of the civil society. And this is how the RSB sustainability standard was developed. And this is also why the RSB standard is the most credible standard that is currently available and supported by many, many NGOs globally. So the RSB standard is the best practice on how to produce sustainable feedstocks and products that we need for this transition, like sustainable aviation fuel. And the RSB also covers sustainability holistically, not only the greenhouse gas emissions, but looks at all the dimensions of sustainability, covering also topics like water and soils, and also looks at the social consequences of agriculture-based fuels. And those can be negative, but also positive, just looking at the potential that we have of sequestering carbon in carbon-smart agriculture approaches, or carbon farming, how it is now called. So our approach also comes with guidance and tools for project developers, operators on how to implement sustainable requirements. And we work with our industry partners to offer advice and support ensuring the sustainability of their supply chains. So our standard is also looked at by policymakers to guide their decisions for policies that shape the transition. It was also a key resource to develop the sustainability framework of the ICAO sustainability criteria. And our criteria also used by project developers look into new SAF supply chains and technologies to guide sustainability considerations. It is also used regionally to evaluate regional feedstock potential, recently in Brazil, and create the regional SAF roadmaps, how we're doing in Ethiopia, but also for certification to allow RSB on product labels. But as I described, the reach of the RSB standard goes well beyond certification on product labels. Now, coming finally back to your question, Kelly, so we think that our ability to work with the stakeholders on setting best practices, on working on implementation for the proof of concepts is why we think we can also contribute to SABA's work through the link of our book and claim project. So to us, as also has been explained previously, book and claim offers this robust and credible system that can allow to disconnect the SAF from the sustainability attributes so that corporates can claim emission reductions through the use of SAF. And we just started with our certification system, a pilot certification process, which will see the first fuel supplier to be RSB certified with the use of the RSB book and claim manual and transfer SAF credits in the book and claim registry. And to summarize, I think with our pilot project, we can contribute to other SAF registry and credit initiatives like SABA's to really draw from the learning of our project and also result of our stakeholder consultations.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Elena, for literally setting the standard here around biofuels for all of us. We appreciate the work of you and your team. There are a few questions mounting here that we'll come back to as we circle, so do take a look in the chat. I'd like to switch over to you, or shift over to you, Lisa, to talk a little bit about Deloitte's progress. Deloitte was one of the first companies to enter into the sustainable aviation fuel space with agreements to address a portion of Deloitte's business travel. What have you achieved through those investments to date? What have you learned? And how do you see SABA, Clean Skies for Tomorrow, and RSB helping to make that process easier for other companies wanting to do the same?
Thanks, John. It's a great question and a lot to unpack across those. So I'll try and take a couple different sections. In terms of what we achieved, first off, a few others have mentioned the importance of demand signals. And I think our transactions with 3 airlines in pretty rapid succession earlier this year helped achieve a number of conversations with sustainability professionals at other organizations interested in doing what we did and exploring their own transactions. And that was certainly one of our goals, was to demonstrate that it was possible and encourage others to consider the same. We've had impact on our own operations through these transactions, resulting in the reduction of over 5,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent relative to traditional jet fuel. And I'm really thrilled that Deloitte was able to be one of the first companies to be able to say that we can do that and to have reduced our environmental impact. Jaap explained a variety of McKinsey's goals around travel. Deloitte has similar. We will continue to be on site with ourselves and our clients for the moments that matter the most. But we will be reducing both how much we travel as well as the intensity. And at SAF is one of the ways to start doing that immediately. In terms of what we've learned, it's run the gamut. First off, a real positive, how enthusiastic our airline partners are to work towards low carbon aviation. It was very complicated to be a first mover. We really considered these transactions demonstration pilots, and we will be sharing our lessons learned in a white paper that we'll publish later this fall. Navigating the contracting process for a new type of transaction where we were purchasing the rights to the scope 3 credits, the environmental attributes, not actually the fuel, was pretty complicated, and navigating that with our legal and risk teams as well. And I'm really thrilled for the support of many on this call to help navigate that process and going forward to make it easier for other corporations. We understand how difficult it is to get clarity deep into the supply chain, for example, on the origin of the feedstocks. Similarly, the challenge of making sure there's a verifiable process to trust the emissions reductions. So everything that SABA and others on this call are working to achieve, we're navigating through our transactions. And then finally, you asked about the role of SABA and RSB. I also mentioned Clean Skies. The challenges that we experienced are part of why we're founding members of SABA and believe that the efforts and the discussion we're having today are really important. All of these organizations are playing important roles in different ways. SABA in guiding companies in how to invest in high quality SAF, given the complexities of the market and the variety of fuels in development. That's written about regularly, and I've seen a few questions in the Q&A on that topic. RSB in terms of recommending and clarifying standards around the environmental attributes and standards that work for cross-sector stakeholders, as Elena mentioned. And finally, WEF Clean Skies for the initial concept of the SAF certificate, which I believe was less than a year ago that was published. And we've come quite a long way since then and really excited to see where that goes. I can't stress enough how important it's going to be to have a book and claim system and digital registry, as many others have said, that recognizes the role of the aviation customer, such as Deloitte. We want to continue to invest and help move the industry to a lower carbon future, but it's going to be essential to have internationally recognized standards so that we know SAF is truly resulting in emissions reductions, that we can report on the reductions per greenhouse gas protocol, and that it's not being double counted. So I want to thank this group for the dialogue and working through the many challenging discussions, and look forward to where we're heading next. Thanks, John.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I mean, I think you've queued up our next panelist just about perfectly. So I'm gonna go to Lauren Upping, Head of Aviation Travel and Tourism at the World Economic Forum. I mean, Lauren, your team at the WEF has really led the charge towards getting customers involved in the SAF market. And WEF's convening power and CEO engagement is really unparalleled. You know, going back in time a little bit, could you provide some context on why and how Clean Skies for Tomorrow was set up and how you actually started to get companies interested in SAF in the first place? So, I mean, I think it's amazing the work you've done and we're very much building on it. How can Clean Skies for Tomorrow and SABA continue to grow awareness and interest in supporting SAF?
Yeah. Thanks, Kelly, and thanks to everyone else who's prepped the way before my contribution. I think there's a lot of similar messages around the opportunity here. So I mean, firstly, I think we can all agree that the COVID pandemic itself has demonstrated just how vital aviation and travel is to our global economy. And many of us in this room are eager to see the industry recover, but in a resilient and sustainable way. As the World Economic Forum, we firmly believe that the energy transition for any sector can't be undertaken by one set of actors or one part of the value chain. And since aviation's a global industry and a hard to abate industry, it's clear to us that all who depend on aviation can and should be part of that decarbonization solution. And that's why we're delighted to see the likes of Deloitte and McKinsey and others participating so deeply in this work. You know, the chicken and egg situation that we find ourselves in that has been mentioned earlier is because of the lack of certainty of demand. And so we have to work together to demonstrate to the sector that there is, in fact, long-term durable demand for sustainable aviation. And SAF is a crucial part of that equation. But the green premium that Laura described earlier limits the uptake and the scaling of that production. And so at the inception of Clean Skies for Tomorrow, we brought leaders across the sector and value chain together, which we think is obviously an opportunity through the World Economic Forum, given it represents leaders from across many different sectors. And many of them express their hesitance to take risk independently, concerned of the economic impact of taking the green or the sustainable route. And so the coalition was really launched to equip and empower leaders to move forward together, to share risk and then distribute the cost implications of a transition to sustainable aviation fuel. And so in doing so, we've looked at tackling policy, financing, and demand signals in an integrated fashion and in concert. That none of those can be done before each other. They have to all be taking place at the same time. And no one level will solve that systemic challenge ahead of us. So we've witnessed significant progress. I mean, the announcements that colleagues on this panel have shared already. We've seen progress on this ambitious coalition of the willing. And we're excited to see some of the policy developments in the US, the EU, etc. But Aviation is a global system, and to reach the scale of SAF that we need to reach net zero by 2050 means we have to rely on voluntary demand mechanisms. And so that's why we established the working group on demand signals together with RMI, resulting in the design of the SAF framework. And there is need to create demand over and above obligations or mandates to accelerate the production. We're obviously encouraged by the desire of aviation customers to address their Scope 3 emissions, and beyond that, also to be partners in designing the SAF accounting system and related tools. So we're excited to have the expertise of all those on the call today, from both NGOs and think tanks, but also from our corporate partners who see that they have a role to play, not just in procuring SAF certificates, but also in contributing to that design. I think there's two key elements that for us are important for our combined success. The one is that any system that we design and implement has to be scalable. That means we need a universal set of rules and tools, such as the book and claim standard and a built for purpose and independent registry. A fragmented solution space will certainly just prevent us from achieving the reductions we need in the time frame that we do have. And to this end, as a forum, we also see the need to make the SAF system replicable beyond aviation. So we're working with partners such as Smart Freight Center and BSR to also look at using SAF as a blueprint for addressing the same challenges across mobility modes. And then the second thing is really the credibility and legitimacy. And a lot of that has been spoken about already on this discussion. But the SAF system and related transactions must have integrity, and we have to ensure it becomes fully recognized as a mitigation lever, and that it's accepted by climate standard bodies such as GHG Protocol and SBTi. GHG guidance on energy attribute certificates for Scope 2 emissions could guide this accounting framework, which we are working on currently, and recent SBTi guidance has acknowledged that certificates may become a lever in the future, provided they're consistent with that GHG Protocol guidance. And so we're continuing to work with the likes of all of you on this panel and others to make sure that we can build credibility and legitimacy for the SAF certificate system.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lauren. We have a little bit of time left. We have 13 minutes left, and we've gotten some great questions in the Q&A. So we're going to go ahead and bring them up to the panelist level at this stage. I think, we heard you four really echo each other in a lot of what we need to do next and how we need to get there. And I think we're all really busy digging in those spaces and trying to get that legitimacy and credibility through these independent systems and by standing up robust standards. But I'm going to just move over to the questions right now so that we can see how people are thinking about this more generally. I think we're all very much in the nuts and bolts and the weeds and trying to make it work. So some of these questions might help us to clarify our own thoughts and understand where everybody else is on this. So one of the first questions is for you, Elena, and we can open it more broadly as well, but the question is, it's widely assumed that crop-based SAF are unsustainable, yet there are thousands of companies producing fully sustainable biofuels that can be used to produce SAF. How is RSB communicating this message to the aviation industry to ensure that crop-based biofuels are not wrongly neglected from the overall SAF matrix?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and also highly relevant, not only towards the aviation industry, but also towards policymakers, I would say, who are currently looking into what are the regulatory systems to incentivize SAF of different technologies and feedstocks. And also here, I think it is very relevant to understand what is sustainable certified fuel and sustainable certified SAF. So as the RSB, we have a sustainability standard that really covers all the sustainability elements holistically. And this sustainability standard is made in a way so that it can be very effectively used to mitigate risks that are related to crop-based fuels. And operators implementing the RSB sustainability standard are then supported by the aviation industry, because we know that, for example, SAFOG, Sustainable Aviation Fuel User Group, pledged to use RSB certified fuel. So we see that there is a differentiation made between SAF and RSB certified SAF. And this is the message that we work hard on delivering together with the aviation industry, but also with organizations like EXA, which is the NGO group, including EDF, WWF, ICCT, that also supports the RSB.
Thank you, Elena. I mean, I think I just want to underline how important clarity is and clear standards are for any environmental market. And it appears that SAF is no different.
Great. Thanks, Elena. I'm going to shift over another question here in the chat for you, Lisa, around, Deloitte's role as a first mover in the space, right, has given you an opportunity to work with different airline partners and others. What has your experience been on that front? Are there challenges or learnings that are worth sharing? And in particular, how are you thinking about the broader network, right? The different interface that you have with clients and others as a way to test ideas and kind of engage your partners and clients differently.
Sure. A couple different parts of that question. The first is from a Deloitte side, when we engaged in our transactions, we had really a triad at the table: our internal sustainability team, our procurement organization, as well as airline leaders in the client services space. On the airline side, it was somewhat similar: sales, procurement, and sustainability. It really helped, I think, to have all of those parties engaged very early on as we were exploring, because then when we got to some of the more technical aspects, legal reviews, et cetera, we were able to relatively easily, I would say, make the case that this was a win for multiple stakeholders. There were certainly some questions about it being such a nascent space, and how does this actually work? What are you actually buying? You're buying environmental attributes. What does that even mean? We don't actually want to own the fuel. So we had to navigate all of those different pieces of the puzzle. That will be hopefully something that others can understand in the paper, as well as the SABA and others are doing now in terms of how other organizations can proceed in this way in the future. I think that the only complexities were really around explaining, what this is and how to navigate. I think that as we move forward, really seeing documentation about how to pursue similar transactions and then how to report and account for them will be really helpful. And John, I've forgotten the second part of your question at this point.
Just how you engage the community differently, your network of partners and clients, right?
Yeah. So Deloitte has a public commitment similar to what Job said for McKinsey that we announced last fall, which includes science-based reduction targets, educating our employees, embedding sustainability in our own operations, and engaging ecosystems. And I think this SAF effort was one of our first examples of sort of tipping our toes into the broader market and considering how we would work with coalitions, competitors, and clients who are also our major suppliers. I will say that even though there are some questions about what we're working on, we also are receiving questions from our clients about Deloitte's own goals, how we will reduce our services to our clients. And so that means that travel, is going to change more broadly as well.
Thanks, Lisa. On this subject of goals, Lauren, you, the World Economic Forum, certainly work across companies in trying to stretch ambition and think about goals. How do you think about sustainable aviation fuel and the goals here for development and growth in a cross-industry senior leader perspective? What are the types of issues that you're considering, and what can we learn in the process from that set of discussions you're having?
Yeah, certainly, it's amazing to see the momentum that is being demonstrated with first movers, but then very quick first followers. And we're starting to see many folks across the value chain rally around a number. We've seen with the breakthrough outcomes from the UN's high-level champions, this desire to move people towards a target of 10% of fuel by 2030 being sustainable aviation fuel. And I think having that kind of a peg in the sand and a vision helps build momentum. So much work goes into, and this is some of the work Job mentioned earlier, was so much work goes into feasibility and criteria and pathways, which are crucial to us actually reaching net zero and also being considered credible when we say we want to meet those targets. But at the same time, it's really important to have champions who will commit on behalf of their organizations. And so we're excited to see growing ambition and growing commitment around a unified target across the globe. And so, yeah, we use that leadership of senior leaders and CEOs in particular to really chart the course and make sure that everyone's agreed on where we need to get to, and then we can really pull up our sleeves and make sure that we do it.
Thanks, Lauren. I think that's so
Wonderful.
Go ahead, John. I was just going to say, we got one question, which I think really underlines what we're trying to do here. So we had a question saying, I buy offsets to cover my travel. Can individuals and companies buy SAF certificates or SAF credits, whatever we want to call it, instead? And I think that's a really important question, because it really is the foundation of what we're trying to do. So maybe Kim would like to speak to that, and maybe any of the others.
Sure, very happy to. As I kind of mentioned in the beginning during my presentation, SABA is focused right now on opening the SAF opportunity to large corporations and organizations, universities, NGOs who have relatively significant aviation, an aviation emission footprint. But absolutely, we plan to open this more broadly to individuals as soon as possible. So the same kind of box you could tick on a travel website where currently you can purchase offsets. Ideally, in an in-state world, you'd be able to support SAF through that same type of approach. So that's we are in conversations with plenty of travel companies about when and how it might be appropriate to put that kind of opportunity to the public. But it's definitely on our radar and in our plans.
Yeah, and I'll just say also that the SABA partners, and in our work with CST and RSB and others, we're trying to also make sure that any approach that we talk about here is consistent with the foundational sort of corporate GHG accounting, including GHG protocol and other systems. So we're working with those systems as well to make sure that we're not contravening any of their own accounting standards and rules, and that this can be robustly accommodated with environmental integrity. Yeah, we haven't come back to you yet, but I think that underpins sort of Deloitte's interest. I'm sorry, my panelists are getting confused. McKinsey's interest in this as well. Did you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question indeed about the offsets point. I think ideally where the SAF certificate would go is in the direction of how renewable electricity purchases work today, where you can make those procurement, purchase, investment decisions and reflect it in your carbon footprint aligned with the greenhouse gas protocol. And I think that's where our North Star is. And until then, it's separate. We don't see it as a substitute for an offset. We continue to offset all of our emissions for the time being until we can properly reflect it in the carbon footprint. And I think that's how we look at it. But ideally, it would be possible to reflect it in a carbon footprint and thus count towards emission reduction targets, which I think would create that strong incentive. And until we're there, I think it's really about showing leadership, going beyond, doing something extra to help drive the momentum.
Thank you so much, Job, and thank you to all of our panelists today. And thanks for joining us to kick off Climate Week. It's day one. I'm sure it'll be a very busy week. It's been an absolute pleasure. If we didn't get to your question, we plan to follow up via email with more responses. And John, please close us out.
We'd like to keep in touch with you. And if you'd like to keep in touch with us, by all means, or hear more from us, we're going to have another special event around the COP. We'll send out information on that. But please do, if we could pop up that last screen here with our contact information so everyone has it. There we go. You can reach us at business.edf.org/SABA for any follow-on questions or comments here going forward. We are very interested in continuing to grow and build momentum and partners. So please do reach out to those who you think might be interested and connect us, and we'd be happy to engage in the conversation there. So thanks. Have a great Climate Week. The planning is counting on each of us to make extraordinary strides over the months ahead. We can do this. All right, see you again, Esco. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.